The air in the derelict tasted like forgotten time. It was a cold, metallic flavor layered with the dust of a century and the faint, unsettling sweetness of decay, not of flesh, but of plastics and wiring giving up the ghost. Every surface was coated in a fine gray powder, the cremated remains of the ship's atmosphere filters. My mag boots clanked against the deck plating with a lonely, hollow sound that the silence seemed to drink right up. The beam of my headlamp cut a nervous path through the gloom, illuminating corridors that were too wide, ceilings that were too high. This ship, the Odyssey, wasn't built for hauling slag or running from corporate patrols. It was built for a dream. And like most dreams, it had died hard out here in the black. We were deep in its guts, standing before a vault door that had no business being on a colony vessel. It was thick, layered plasteel, the kind of thing banking guilds use to guard fortunes, not the kind of thing you use to protect seed banks or survey equipment. Ava stood beside me, her helmet off, her short-cut gray hair catching the light from the plasma cutter Reese was wrestling into position. Her face was a road map of past mistakes and hard-won victories. And right now, her expression was one of deep, abiding suspicion. She ran a gloved hand over the vault's surface, leaving a streak in the dust. There's no designation, no warning label, no emergency access panel, she murmured, her voice tight in the confines of the corridor. Whatever's in there, they didn't want anyone getting to it. Ever. Reese grunted, the plasma cutter hissing as he primed the ignition sequence. He was a mountain of a man, vat-grown muscle layered over a skeleton built for high-gravity mining, and he treated the heavy industrial tool like a toy. Means it's worth something, he rumbled, his voice a low vibration that seemed to buzz in my teeth. Or it's something that bites. I knelt, running my own diagnostic slate over the locking mechanism. It was magnetic, ancient, and utterly dead. No power. That was the only reason we had a chance. It's not going to bite, Reese. It's just old tech, I said, mostly to reassure myself. The power conduits are cold. She's been a ghost for at least 100 years. My name is Silas, and I'm the one who keeps our rust bucket, the vagrant, from shaking itself into its component atoms. I understand the universe through the language of failing systems and jury-rigged solutions. A ship like the Odyssey was a cathedral of ghosts to me, and I couldn't shake the feeling we were committing a special kind of sacrilege. Lena, our slicer, was perched on a stack of dusty cargo containers, a web of fiber optic cables snaking from her wrist deck to a port I'd pried open on the wall. She was a kid, barely 20, with eyes that saw the digital world more clearly than the real one. The ship's log is a mess. Captain, she said without looking up, her fingers a blur across a holographic interface. Data's corrupted in cascades, but I got fragments. They were running from something. They sealed this vault an hour before the life support logs go black. One final entry. The heart is safe. The echo is silenced. May God forgive us for the cage we built. Eva's jaw tightened. An echo. Great. Sounds less like treasure and more like a curse. Reese just grinned, flipping down his welding mask. Good thing we don't believe in curses. He squeezed the trigger, and a spear of white-hot plasma screamed to life, flooding the corridor with a brilliant, terrible light and the smell of superheated metal. He began to carve a circle around the lock, slow and steady, his massive frame perfectly still. The noise was deafening, a physical force that vibrated through the deck and into my bones. We were 3 days out from the nearest consortium patrol lane, deep in a sector marked on the charts as a graveyard of failed colonies and stellar anomalies. We'd picked up the Odyssey's faint beacon by pure chance, a whisper of a forgotten age. A ship this old, a first-wave colony vessel, was the salvage score of a lifetime. Its systems, its alloys, its data cores, all built before the consortium homogenized everything into their clean, efficient, soul-crushing template to a crew of rust dogs like us. It was a gold mine, but this vault felt different. It felt wrong. As Reese cut, I watched the thermal readings on my slate. The heat from the plasma wasn't dissipating into the door as it should. It was being absorbed, contained. There was something on the other side, something a lot more sophisticated than a simple vacuum-sealed room. "Something's off, Ava," I said over the roar. The door's layered with a heatsink alloy I've never seen before. It's actively drawing the energy inward. Ava leaned closer, her eyes narrowed on the glowing line of molten metal. "To protect what's inside, or to power something up," Lena added, her voice sharp with alarm. "I'm reading a trace energy surge from inside the vault. Faint, but it's there. The cutter is acting like a key, waking it up." Reese didn't stop. He was halfway through, almost there. He grunted, focused only on his task. A low hum began to emanate from the door, a deep thrumming that resonated in my chest. It was a sound of immense power held in check, a sleeping giant stirring. "Shut it down," Res Ava commanded. Now, but it was too late. With a final shriek of tortured metal, the circular section of the door gave way, tumbling inward with a heavy clang that echoed in the sudden silence. The plasma cutter sputtered and died. The hum from within the vault grew louder, and a soft, pale blue light spilled into the corridor, pushing back the shadows. It wasn't the harsh, sterile light of consortium tech. It was gentle, organic, almost alive. For a moment, none of us moved. We just stared into the small, circular opening at the heart of that massive door. My job is to know how things work, but I had no frame of reference for this. It felt like prying open a tomb and finding a star inside. Ava drew the heavy caliber pistol she kept strapped to her thigh. Reese dropped the cutter and raised his fists, a far more effective weapon in his hands. I aimed my headlamp into the opening, its beam swallowed by the soft blue glow. The room inside wasn't large. The walls were lined with smooth, seamless panels that pulsed with the same faint light. In the center of the chamber sat a single object, a sleek, black cryopod, its canopy frosted over. Wires and conduits snaked from its base, not into the ship's systems, but into a metallic sphere resting on a pedestal beside it. The sphere was the source of the hum, the source of the light. It was about the size of a man's head, its surface a shifting, liquid-like pattern of silver and black. It wasn't just a power source. I could feel it, a strange pressure in my mind, like standing too close to a massive speaker. "What is that?" Lena whispered, sliding down from her perch. "The heart," Eva said, her voice barely audible. "The heart they were protecting." I took a step forward. My slate held out, trying to get a reading. The energy signature was off the charts, but it was a type I'd never seen before, stable and impossibly dense. It wasn't a fission reaction, not fusion, not antimatter. It was something else entirely. As I got closer, the patterns on the sphere's surface swirled faster, and the hum intensified. The frost on the cryopod began to melt. On a small display at the pod's base, a single word blinked in an archaic script, vital. "There's someone in there," I breathed. "And they're alive." Before anyone could react, Lena let out a choked gasp. "Captain, we have a problem. A big one." On her holographic display, a schematic of the local space shimmered. A single red icon had just appeared at the edge of the debris field. "Consortium Patrol Cutter," she said, her voice trembling. "Designation Vigilance. They just dropped out of hyperspace. They're hailing us." Ava cursed, spinning around. "How we're running silent. There's no way they could have tracked us." "They didn't track us," Lena said, pointing a shaking finger at the vault. "They tracked it. When we opened that door, it sent out a ping. Not a distress call. A homing beacon. A here I am signal." The voice that crackled over our comms was exactly what I expected: calm, clipped, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the voice of the consortium, the voice of cosmic order and bureaucratic dread. "Unregistered vessel, you are trespassing in a restricted archaeological zone. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Non-compliance will be met with corrective action." Eva grabbed her helmet. "Reese, get that sphere." "Silas, help me with the pod." "Lena, get back to the Vagrant and get her ready to fly. We are not getting taken by those sanitized bastards." Reese moved without hesitation, wrapping his huge arms around the humming sphere. The moment he touched it, the light in the room flared, and he cried out, stumbling back. "It's hot, and it's talking in my head." "Fight it," Ava snapped, already wrestling with the seals on the cryopod. "Silas, now." I rushed to help her, my mind reeling. A homing beacon, an archaeological zone. The consortium didn't care about old ships. They stripped them for resources and erased them from the charts. For them to declare this area restricted meant one thing: they knew the Odyssey was here, and they knew what was inside it. The pod was heavy, locked into the deck. While Eva worked the seals, I got my laser cutter and began slicing through the floor mounts. The acrid smell of burning metal filling the small chamber. The humming from the sphere grew into a low-frequency moan, and I could feel that pressure in my skull again. 1,000 wordless whispers trying to find purchase. Reese roared, his muscles straining as he lifted the sphere. Veins stood out on his neck. His teeth gritted. "It knows we're here," he growled. "It doesn't like us." Outside, the consortium's voice returned, colder this time. "Your lack of response has been noted. You have 30 seconds to comply before we disable your vessel permanently." "Lena, status," Ava yelled, her voice echoing in the corridor. "I'm almost there. Just give me a minute." A deep thud vibrated through the hull of the Odyssey, a magnetic clamp. They weren't waiting. They were boarding us. "They're on the ship," I shouted. "They're coming." The last floor mount snapped, and the cryopod came free with a groan. It was impossibly heavy. Eva and I strained to drag it out of the vault, our boots slipping on the dusty deck. Reese followed, cradling the glowing, humming sphere like a bomb, his face a mask of pain and concentration. "We're not going to make it back to the airlock," Ava panted. "They'll cut us off." "Then we find another way out," I said, my mind racing. I knew this ship's schematics, or what was left of them. "Maintenance shaft. Section Gamma 7 leads to the secondary cargo bay. The Vagrant is docked on the outer hull, right next to it. It was a long shot, a crawl through claustrophobic tunnels, but it was our only chance. We abandoned the main corridor, plunging into a darkened maintenance passage barely wide enough for Reese and his cargo to squeeze through. The air was thick and stagnant. The only sounds are ragged breaths and the incessant, maddening hum of the sphere. Behind us, we could hear the methodical clank of armored boots and the clipped, precise commands of a consortium boarding party. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. They were inevitable, a force of nature. They moved with the chilling confidence of those who believe they own the universe and are simply tidying it up. We were just another piece of messy, defiant dust to be swept away. That's the thing about the consortium. They don't hate you. They don't get angry. They just correct you. They find your deviation from the norm, your inefficient, chaotic existence, and they fix it, usually by impounding your ship, seizing your assets, and reassigning you to a lifetime of debt labor on some frozen rock. They called it societal integration. We called it a living death. We scrambled through the shaft, the metal groaning around us. The sphere in Reese's arms pulsed with light, illuminating our panicked faces. The whispers in my head were getting stronger, a dizzying chorus of alien thoughts and emotions. It wasn't hostile, but it was overwhelming. A flood of data I couldn't process. Then, the cryopod's display flickered. The word vital was replaced by a new one awakening. The lid of the pod hissed, a thin crack appearing around the seal. A wisp of cryogenic gas escaped, cold as a ghost's touch. Ava and I froze, staring at it in horror. No, 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 she muttered. Not now. Inside the pod, behind the fogging canopy, something was moving. We were running for our lives, dragging a century-old mystery and a waking ghost through the guts of a dead ship, with the galaxy's most efficient janitors right on our heels. And the thing we'd stolen, the heart of this whole mess, was humming louder and louder, as if it was finally starting to enjoy the chase. The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. Maybe it wasn't a homing beacon. Maybe it was an alarm clock. And we had just slammed the snooze button. The hissing from the cryopod grew louder, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the thrumming of the sphere and the distant, rhythmic clang of consortium boots. A network of fractures spread across the canopy, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. We were dragging our own ticking bomb through the guts of this metal graveyard. The maintenance shaft was a tight, brutal squeeze, its walls slick with a century of condensation and grime. I was in the lead, my headlamp beam bouncing erratically, every flicker of a shadow looking like an ambush. Behind me, Eva and Reese wrestled with the pod, their grunts and curses echoing in the confined space. Reese was in a bad way. The sphere, cradled against his chest, pulsed in time with his racing heartbeat. Sweat streamed down his face. His eyes were squeezed shut in concentration, and his breath came in ragged gasps. "It's showing me things," he forced out. His voice strained. "Stars, not our stars. Cities made of light. And it's afraid. Terrified." A new voice, the calm and collected officer from the Vigilance, echoed from a nearby comms panel, his tone making the hairs on my neck stand up. "Subjects, your resistance is illogical. The asset you have taken is a Class 1 archaeological artifact. Its containment is mandated by the Preservation Accords. Surrender it, and you will be processed with standard tier leniency." Eva spat into the darkness. "Tell him where he can file his accords." Silas. I didn't have to. The choice was made for us. The corridor ahead of us was suddenly flooded with a blinding white light. I threw up an arm, shielding my eyes. When the glare subsided, I saw a squad of consortium soldiers in pristine white armor blocking the path. They didn't raise their rifles. Instead, two of them held bulky projectors. "Final warning," the officer's voice said, now seemingly coming from the soldiers themselves. "Cease your unauthorized relocation of the asset." Reese let out a strangled roar, not of defiance, but of pure agony. The sphere in his arms flared with an intense blue light. "It hates them," he yelled. "It wants to—" The soldiers fired, not plasma bolts, but thick, expanding streams of white foam. It was containment tech, designed to subdue and immobilize without damaging property, or, in this case, the artifact. The foam hit the walls, hardening instantly into a rock-solid barrier, sealing the passage in front of us. Another squad appeared behind us, their projectors lighting up the shaft. We were boxed in. "Back!" Eva shouted. "Side passage, now!" I saw it a moment before she did a ladder leading down into a lower deck conduit. I kicked the rusted hatch open and scrambled down, not waiting to see if it held my weight. Ava followed, shoving the top of the cryopod down toward me. It was a clumsy, desperate ballet of sweat and gravity. We lowered it, scraping the sides of the shaft, the cracking canopy groaning in protest. Reese came last, his face a pale mask. As his boots cleared the opening, he slammed the hatch shut just as the corridor above was completely filled with the rapidly hardening white foam. We were in a darker, tighter space now, a power conduit humming with residual energy. The air was hot and tasted of ozone, and we were dragging our prize deeper into the ship's forgotten bowels. The sphere's light was our only guide, casting long, dancing shadows that made the cramped tunnel feel like the throat of some great beast. The whispers in my head were clearer now, coalescing around Reese's pain. They weren't words, but feelings, intentions. Escape. Hide. The echo comes. The hunters are here. The hunters. It had to mean the consortium. The lid of the cryopod suddenly popped open with a final, sharp hiss, releasing a plume of freezing vapor. It swung open on its ancient hinges, revealing the occupant within. It was a woman. Or a girl. It was hard to tell. She was suspended in a shimmering, gelatinous fluid, her face serene, framed by long, pale hair that floated around her like a halo. She wore a simple, form-fitting black suit that seemed to drink the light. And around her neck, she wore a collar of the same black, shifting metal as the sphere. A jolt went through Reese, and he stumbled, slamming against the conduit wall. She's talking to it," he gasped, his eyes wide with a strange mix of terror and awe. "And it's answering." Before I could process that, Lena's voice crackled in my helmet, frantic and strained. "Captain, they've cut me off from the Vagrant's primary systems. They're slicing through my firewalls like they're not even there. And, oh gods, they're on the outer hull. They're trying to breach the cockpit. Hold them off," Eva commanded, her voice betraying a sliver of desperation. "Silas, how much further to the cargo bay?" I checked the partial schematic on my slate. "We're close. Just past this junction. But if they're on the hull, they'll be waiting for us in the bay." It was a trap. They knew where we were going. We'd traded one box for a slightly larger one. We reached the end of the conduit and looked down through a grated floor into the cavernous space of the secondary cargo bay. It was a vast, dark cathedral of forgotten commerce, filled with the skeletal remains of cargo containers and loading machinery. Far across the bay, I could see the faint outline of the Vagrant, a familiar, ugly shape clinging to the side of the derelict like a remora. And between us and our ship, spaced out in a perfect tactical formation, were more white-armored soldiers, their helmet lights cutting sharp cones through the oppressive gloom. They weren't moving. They were just waiting. Patient. Inevitable. The officer's voice echoed through the vast space, amplified and impossibly calm. Your efforts are admirable for primitives, but this ends now. I am Proctor Thorne of the Archaeological Corps. You are in possession of the device known as the Silent Heart and its bonded warden. They are not treasure. They are a weapon and its failsafe, a system of immense historical and existential significance. You cannot comprehend what you are meddling with. We comprehend that it's our ticket out of here, Ava muttered, her pistol held tight in a two-handed grip. Reese, can you do anything with that glowing ball of yours? Reese was shaking his head, his face slick with sweat. It's afraid. It wants to hide. It's trying to make me hide. It doesn't fight. The woman in the pod, the warden shifted. Her eyes, which I could now see, were a startling, luminous silver, snapped open. The gel around her dissolved in a flash of blue light, and she sat up, water cascading from her slight frame. She took a breath, the first in 100 years, and the sound was like the universe holding its own. She looked right at Reese, and the humming from the sphere, the Silent Heart, changed pitch, becoming a low, sorrowful thrum. Proctor Thorne's voice hardened. The warden is active. Containment protocols are now authorized at maximum level. Subdue the carriers. Seize the assets. Leave the vessel intact. The soldiers below raised their rifles. This time, they weren't projectors. They were plasma carbines, their charging coils whining with lethal intent. We were out of time and out of options. Silas, Eva said, her voice grim. Get that bay door open, the one the Vagrant is latched to. Now. I can't not from here. Then find a way, she snarled. Reese, with me. We're making a distraction. She didn't wait for an answer. She kicked open the grate and dropped to the floor below, rolling behind a stack of corroded containers. Reese followed, his movements sluggish, the heart held out in front of him like a shield. The warden stood up in the cryopod, her movements fluid and impossibly graceful. She looked from the soldiers to the heart, and a look of profound sadness crossed her face. The soldiers opened fire. Blue-white bolts of plasma seared the air, slamming into the containers Eva and Reese were using for cover, filling the bay with the shriek of vaporizing metal. I scrambled along the gantry, my mind racing. The door controls were on the far side of the bay, an impossible sprint under fire. But the power conduits, they all led to a central regulation nexus, right below me. I holstered my cutter and pulled out a spool of bypass cable. It was insane. A 1 in a million shot. If I overloaded the nexus, I might be able to short the door's magnetic locks, forcing them open. I might also blow up half the cargo bay and us with it. It was the only plan I had. I clipped onto the gantry and rappelled down, landing behind a massive, derelict loading crane. The air was thick with ozone and the smell of hot metal. Plasma fire stitched the darkness around me. I could see Eva laying down, covering fire with her pistol, each shot a deliberate, calculated bark aimed at forcing the soldiers to keep their heads down. Reese was just standing there, the silent heart emitting a soft, steady pulse of light that seemed to bend the plasma bolts away from him, causing them to miss by inches. It wasn't a shield. It was something else. A subtle manipulation of space, of probability. A whisper of "don't shoot here" that the universe was inexplicably obeying. I reached the nexus, a scarred panel of blinking lights and thick, armored cables. I ripped the cover off and got to work, my fingers flying as I spliced my bypass into the main power feed. On my comm. Lena screamed. They're through. They're in the cockpit. Then, a muffled crash and the sound of a plasma discharge, followed by a terrible, gut-wrenching silence. Lena. Ava yelled. No response. My blood ran cold, but I couldn't stop. I had to finish this. I jammed the bypass cable home. Sparks erupted from the panel, and a wave of energy blew me backward. The lights in the cargo bay flickered violently, and then, with a deafening groan of tortured metal, the massive outer bay door began to shudder open. A sliver of star-dusted black appeared, then widened. The atmosphere in the bay began to vent into the void with a rising, soul-stealing howl. Loose debris, dust, and then entire containers began to slide toward the opening. Ava was already moving, grabbing the cryopod and pushing it toward our ship. The warden stood calmly within it, her silver eyes sweeping across the chaos, her pale hair whipping in the gale. Reese stumbled after Ava, still clutching the heart. The consortium soldiers were thrown into disarray. Some were dragged screaming into space. Others engaged their mag boots, anchoring themselves to the deck. Proctor Thorne's voice cut through the storm, filled with a cold fury I hadn't heard before. Vigilance to all fire teams. The warden is unsecured, I repeat. The warden is unsecured. Disable the pirate vessel. Do not let them escape with the heart. A new sound joined the chaos. The high-pitched whine of a capital ship weapon charging. They were going to fire on the vagrant. I scrambled to my feet, my ears ringing, and sprinted for my ship. The wind threatened to tear me from the deck, but I slammed my mag boots to full and pushed on. I reached the vagrant's ramp just as Ava and Reese got the pod inside. I looked back. The warden was standing at the edge of the ramp, not looking at us, but up at the vigilance looming outside the bay. She raised a hand, and the silent heart in Reese's arms flared with a light so bright it hurt to look at. A beam of pure, white energy lanced out from the consortium ship, but it didn't hit us. In the instant before impact, a shimmering wall of distorted space appeared between our ship and the blast. The energy bolt struck it and vanished without a sound, like a stone tossed into a perfectly still pond. The warden lowered her hand, and the spatial distortion dissolved. She turned and walked calmly into our ship. "Get us out of here," she said, her voice quiet, yet it carried over the roar of the dying atmosphere. It was the first time she had spoken, and the sound of it was more alien and more ancient than the stars themselves. I slammed the ramp control, and the door sealed, cutting off the storm. The vagrant shuddered as our docking clamps disengaged. I scrambled to the cockpit. Lena was slumped over the console, a smoking black scorch mark on the wall beside her head, but she was breathing. Unconscious, but alive. I strapped myself into the pilot's seat, my hands flying over the controls. The engine screamed in protest as I pushed them to the brink, hurtling our battered ship out of the dead husk of the Odyssey and into the cold, unforgiving black. An alarm blared. The FTL drive was damaged, leaking chronoton particles. We could make one jump, one blind, desperate leap into the unknown. Behind us, the Vigilance was already repositioning for another shot. I didn't hesitate. I slammed my hand down on the jump drive actuator. The universe outside the cockpit twisted into an insane vortex of color and light. We were thrown against our seats, the ship groaning as if it were being torn apart. Then, with a final, violent lurch, the stars snapped back into place. New stars, unfamiliar constellations. We were somewhere else, somewhere far away. The engines sputtered and died. The alarms fell silent. We were adrift in the quiet afterglow of the jump. Reese collapsed, the silent heart dimming as it rolled from his grasp. Eva rushed to Lena's side, and the warden stood in the center of the cockpit, her silver eyes looking at me. "They will not stop," she said, her voice a calm whisper in the sudden, terrifying silence. "The consortium are merely the hounds. It is the hunter they truly serve. The echo is coming, and the heart is the only thing that can silence it." I stared at her, at the impossible woman we had pulled from a century of sleep. We hadn't salvaged a treasure. We hadn't stolen a weapon. We had stolen the key to a conflict 1,000 times older than we were, and in doing so, we had just painted a target on the back of all humanity. We were adrift in a void that felt heavier than any vacuum had a right to be. The vagrant was a wounded animal, its systems humming with a low, irregular pulse, the emergency lights bathing us in a sickly crimson glow. We had jumped blind, without coordinates, into a region of space that wasn't on any chart in our databanks. Outside the viewport, the stars were wrong, too bright, clustered in unfamiliar, jagged patterns, veiled by a thin, iridescent nebula that seemed to breathe with its own slow, cold light. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying, a reminder of just how lost we were. Inside the cockpit, the silence was broken only by the ragged breathing of my crew. Lena was still unconscious, strapped into the co-pilot's chair, a med patch pulsing on her temple. Eva was kneeling beside her, checking the readouts, her face a mask of grim determination. Reese was slumped against the bulkhead, his massive frame diminished, his eyes hollow and haunted. The silent heart sat on the deck between his boots, its light now a dull, pulsating ember, its once loud hum reduced to a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. And then there was the warden. She stood by the main viewport, gazing out at the alien stars, her hands clasped behind her back. The black suit she wore seemed to absorb the red emergency light, making her look like a silhouette cut from the void itself. She hadn't spoken since her cryptic warning. She just stood there, a living artifact, radiating an aura of calm that was more unsettling than the panic I was fighting to keep down. "Status, Silas," Eva said, her voice tight, not looking up from Lena. I ran my hands over the primary console, wincing at the cascade of red warnings. "Engines are dead. FTL drive is fused. It'll take a week to rebuild it, assuming we had the parts, which we don't. Life support is at 30% and failing. We're running on auxiliary batteries." I paused, swallowing the dry lump of fear in my throat, and we have no idea where we are. The nav computer is just flashing unknown sector. We're ghosts in a machine that's about to stop running. Eva swore softly. Lena's stable, but she's got a concussion and some neural shock from whatever they used on her. She's not waking up anytime soon. We're on our own. She stood up, turning to face the warden. "All right, you, the warden. We saved your life, and in return, we're floating in the middle of nowhere with the most powerful regime in the galaxy hunting us. You said they wouldn't stop. Who are they? And what is the Echo?" The warden turned slowly. Her silver eyes, devoid of pupils or irises, seemed to look through Eva's, through the ship, into something far beyond. "The consortium believes they are the guardians of order," she said, her voice a melodious, monotone whisper. "They are merely curators of a cage they do not understand. They seek to control the heart, to use its power to impose their stillness upon the galaxy. They fear the chaos of life, so they seek to freeze it in a perfect, sterile symmetry." She walked over to the silent heart, kneeling beside it with a reverence that made my skin crawl. She placed a pale hand on its surface. The sphere's light pulsed brighter, responding to her touch, and the hum grew slightly louder. "This is not a weapon. It is a seed, a remnant of the first light, from before the stillness began. My people, the architects, created it to preserve the potential for change." "And the Echo?" I asked, stepping away from the console. A shadow seemed to pass over her face, a flicker of ancient, profound sorrow. "The Echo is the opposite of the heart. It is the hunger of the void given form. It is the desire for absolute zero, for the cessation of all movement, all thought, all life. It is what the consortium unknowingly serves in their quest for perfect order. It hunts the heart, for as long as the seed exists. The stillness can never be absolute." She looked up at me. "The Odyssey fled from its awakening a century ago. They failed to hide it. You have now taken up their burden." Reese let out a bitter, choked laugh. "Burden. That's a nice word for a death sentence. It's in my head. You know, the heart. It's whispering things. Memories that aren't mine. Terror. It knows the Echo is coming." The warden nodded. "You carried it. It has marked you. You are now a conduit for its song. It senses the approaching dark." "So what do we do?" Eva demanded, her hand resting on her pistol. "We can't fight an entity that wants to eat the universe. We can't even fix our own ship. We cannot fight the Echo directly," the warden said. "Not yet. The heart must be planted. It must be allowed to take root in a place where the Echo cannot easily reach it. A place of vibrant, chaotic life." "Where?" I asked. She stood, pointing toward a cluster of stars in the distance, visible through the nebula's veil. "There, the Viridian system. It is a nexus of unstable, untamed energies, a place the consortium avoids, for it defies their orderly models. The heart can be hidden there, within the core of its wildest planet." "Viridian," I repeated, checking the useless nav computer out of habit. "I've heard stories, smugglers' tales. They say it's a death trap. Gravity storms, psychic predators, terrain that changes overnight. No one goes there and comes back." "It is a crucible of life," the warden corrected, "precisely where the seed belongs. If we can reach it, I can awaken the heart fully. Its resonance will shield the system, hiding it from the Echo and the consortium. It will buy your galaxy time." "Time for what?" Eva asked. "Time to learn how to fight back," the warden said simply. It was a mad plan, a suicide run into a legendary hellscape, guided by a woman who might not even be human, carrying an artifact that was apparently the only thing standing between existence and eternal nothingness. It was exactly the kind of desperate, impossible job we were built for. "We can't jump there," I said, the mechanic in me taking over. "But if I can cannibalize the secondary power coupling from the cargo bay clamps, I might be able to rig the sublight engines for a high burn boost. We could limp there on inertia. It'll take days, and we'll be running on fumes when we arrive." Ava looked at me, then at Reese, who gave a weak, resigned nod. She holstered her pistol. "All right, Silas, get to work. Reese, help him if you can stand. Warden, you stay out of the way and keep your seed quiet. We're Rust dogs. We don't do noble sacrifices. We do the job, and we survive." We set to work. It was a grueling, desperate race against the failing life support. I spent hours in the cramped, freezing engineering bay, my hands numb, stripping parts from non-essential systems to feed the hungry maw of the engines. Reese, driven by the whispers in his head, worked with a frantic energy, his immense strength allowing us to move components that should have required a loader bot. As we worked, the warden remained in the cockpit, staring out at the stars. Once, I went up to check on Lena, and I found the warden standing over her, her hand hovering just above Lena's forehead. A faint, silver light bridged the gap between them. Lena's breathing seemed easier, her color better. The warden looked at me, her expression unreadable, and the light vanished. "She is strong," was all she said. 2 days later, we were ready. The Vagrant was a patchwork of bypass cables and jury-rigged systems, held together by hope and sheer stubbornness. I initiated the burn sequence. The ship shuddered violently, metal groaning under the strain, as we accelerated toward the Viridian system. The journey was a blur of tension and exhaustion. We took turns sleeping in short, fitful bursts. The air grew stale and cold, and all the while, the silent heart in the cockpit pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat, a silent drum counting down the remaining moments of our lives. As we approached the Viridian system, the view through the viewport changed. The iridescent nebula gave way to a chaotic swirl of vibrant colors, purples, greens, and furious golds. The stars here didn't sit still. They seemed to dance, their light erratic and intense. And in the center of it all was our destination, Viridia Prime. It wasn't a planet. It was a storm given solid form. Its surface was a shifting mosaic of colossal, verdant jungles, oceans that glowed with bioluminescent fire, and mountain ranges that pierced the atmosphere like jagged teeth. The atmosphere itself was a turbulent tempest of storms that made the ones on Jupiter look like gentle breezes. "Sensors are going crazy," Ava reported from the co-pilot's seat. Lena still too weak to take her post. "Gravity wells are shifting randomly. Electromagnetic interference is off the charts. It's like the whole planet is having a seizure." "It is alive," the warden said, standing behind us. "It senses the heart. It is welcoming us." "Looks more like it's trying to eat us," I muttered, fighting the controls as the ship bucked and weaved in the planet's chaotic gravity field. Suddenly, a proximity alarm blared, cutting through the noise of the straining hull. A new icon appeared on the sensor display, cutting through the interference with terrifying clarity. It was behind us, emerging from the nebula we had just crossed. It was a ship, but not like the consortium's sleek white wedges. This was a sleek, Predatory shadow, blacker than the void, shaped like a shard of obsidian. Contact, Ava yelled. Unknown configuration. It's fast. Incredibly fast. The hounds are here, the warden said, her voice devoid of surprise. The consortium's elite pursuit vessel, a silencer class. They found us. Reese groaned from the back, clutching his head. The heart, it's screaming. They're close. The black ship didn't hail us. It didn't issue warnings. It simply opened fire. A beam of dark, violet energy lashed out, striking our rear deflector shields. The vagrant was thrown forward, alarms screaming as consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Shields are down to 10%, I shouted, struggling to regain control. Engines are overheating. We can't outrun them, and we can't fight them. We must reach the surface, the warden said calmly. Into the storm. They will not follow us into the heart of the chaos. Are you crazy? Eva yelled over the din. That atmosphere will tear us apart. It is our only chance. The warden replied. Another blast from the silencer rocked the ship. The artificial gravity flickered and died, leaving us floating in our harnesses amidst a cloud of debris and smoke. Do it, Silas, Sir Eva commanded, grabbing a drifting fire extinguisher. Take us down. I gritted my teeth and pointed the vagrant's nose straight at the swirling, violent heart of Viridia Prime. I pushed the throttles to maximum, bypassing every safety protocol I had left. The ship screamed as we hit the upper atmosphere. It wasn't like entry. It was like crashing into a wall of fire and noise. The hull groaned. The heat shielding flared white-hot. Through the viewport, all we could see was a maelstrom of lightning and clouds the color of bruised flesh. The ship shook so violently I thought my teeth would shatter. Behind us, on the edge of the sensors, the silencer ship hesitated. Its perfect, orderly systems couldn't calculate the chaos of the storm. It pulled up. A dark shadow retreating from the untamable fury of the planet. We were alone again. Alone in a freefall towards a world that wanted to consume us. Hold it together, Edis, old girl, I whispered to the ship, my hands white-knuckled on the yoke. The warden moved to the front of the cockpit, holding onto a ceiling strut with effortless grace. The silent heart, now floating beside her, was glowing with a blinding intensity, its hum drowning out the roar of the storm. She raised her hand, and the light from the sphere expanded, enveloping the vagrant in a protective bubble of shimmering, distorted space. The violent shaking ceased. The heat faded. We were falling through the heart of the storm, untouched, shielded by the very power we were trying to hide. Below us, the clouds parted, revealing a landscape of impossible, savage beauty. Towering trees with leaves the size of city blocks, rivers of glowing magma, and creatures that defied description soaring through the turbulent air. We were heading toward a massive crater in the center of a jungle, a wound in the world that pulsed with the same raw energy as the heart. The cradle, the warden said. Take us there. I guided the ship down, the protective bubble holding as we descended into the crater. We landed with a jarring thud on a plateau of obsidian-like rock, surrounded by towering, crystalline formations that hummed in resonance with the heart. The engines finally died, this time for good. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant, muffled roar of the storm above and the alien sounds of the jungle around us. We had made it. We were alive. We were on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, with a broken ship, a waking artifact, and an ancient enemy waiting in the orbit above. Eva unbuckled her harness. Floating in the zero-G, she looked at me, then at the warden, a grim smile playing on her lips. "Well," she said, pulling her pistol from its holster, "we're not bored anymore. Let's go plant this seed and see what grows." We popped the hatch, and the air of Viridia Prime rushed in hot, humid, and smelling of ozone, crushed spices, and something raw and primal. It was the smell of life untamed. We stepped out onto the alien world, the first humans to set foot here and live. The real fight, I knew, was just beginning. The consortium wouldn't wait forever, and the Echo was still listening in the dark. But for now, we had ground beneath our feet, and we weren't kneeling yet. The air of Viridia Prime was thick and heavy, a humid blanket woven from the scents of alien pollen, geothermal vents, and the electric tang of the perpetual storm raging high above. The ground beneath our mag boots was a smooth, black volcanic glass, cool to the touch despite the oppressive heat. We stood on a plateau within the massive crater, surrounded by a forest of crystalline spires that pulsed with a faint, internal light, their chimes a soft, melodic counterpoint to the distant roar of the planet's fury. The Vagrant, a broken metal shell, sat behind us, a monument to our impossible journey. Lena was awake now, leaning heavily against the landing strut, her face pale, but her eyes sharp. She held a diagnostic slate, her fingers tracing the shimmering lines of data with a practiced grace. "Local energy readings are chaotic," she said, her voice a little hoarse. "It's like the whole planet is a massive, unregulated power plant. The crystals, the soil, even the air is humming with it. It's interfering with everything." Reese stood a few feet away, the silent heart held in his hands. Here, on the planet's surface, the whispers had changed. His face was no longer a mask of pain, but of a kind of awed confusion. "It's happy," he rumbled, looking down at the glowing sphere. "It feels like it's come home. It's singing to the planet, and the planet is singing back." The warden, her silver eyes taking in the savage beauty of the crater, nodded. "This is the cradle, a place of genesis. The heart's song will be amplified here. We must take it to the core of the nexus, to the geode of life at the center of this crater. There, I can complete the ritual of planting." She pointed toward the center of the plateau, where a series of smaller, more intensely glowing crystals formed a ring around a fissure in the obsidian ground, from which a soft emerald light emanated. "Ritual of planting," Ava echoed, her hand never straying far from her sidearm. "Sounds simple enough. Let's get this over with so Silas can start figuring out how to turn this heap of scrap back into a spaceship." As we started toward the fissure, a new sound cut through the alien symphony of the jungle, a high-pitched, chittering screech that echoed off the crystal spires. We all froze. On the ridges surrounding the crater, shapes began to appear. They were sleek, six-legged predators, their bodies a blur of iridescent chitin, their heads dominated by a pair of razor-sharp mandibles and multiple glowing red eyes. "We've got company," I said, pulling my own sidearm, a battered but reliable kinetic pistol. "Stalkers," Lena breathed, her eyes wide as she scanned them with her slate. "Apex predators, pack hunters. According to the fragmentary data from old survey probes, They're territorial and incredibly aggressive. Their chitin is dense enough to deflect small arms fire. Great, Eva grunted. Psychic predators would have been too cliché, I suppose. The stalkers didn't attack. They flowed down the ridges with a liquid grace, fanning out, surrounding us. Their red eyes were fixed not on us, but on the silent heart in Reese's hands. They are drawn to the heart, the warden said, her calm voice a stark contrast to the rising tension. They are children of this world's chaos. They see its power, and they covet it. One of the stalkers, larger than the rest, took a step forward, its mandibles clicking a rapid, threatening rhythm. It let out a piercing shriek, a clear challenge. Reese, to my astonishment, took a step forward to meet it. He held the heart out. "It's telling me not to be afraid," he said, his voice a low murmur. "It says they are just curious." The lead stalker lunged. It moved with impossible speed, a blur of green and black. Ava and I opened fire, our kinetic rounds sparking harmlessly off its armored carapace. But it wasn't aiming for Reese. It was aiming for the heart. Just as its mandibles were about to clamp down on the sphere, a shimmering wave of force erupted from it, sending the creature tumbling backward with a shriek of pain and confusion. The other stalkers hissed, their aggression turning to wary uncertainty. "The heart protects itself," the warden said, "but it will not be enough. They will overwhelm us." She turned to me. "Silas, the geode. It is not just a fissure, it is a resonance chamber. The ship's power core, can you overload it?" My mind raced, connecting the dots. "You want me to create a focused energy pulse, a feedback loop with the planet's energy field?" "Yes," she said. "The frequency must be precise. I will give it to you. The resulting resonance cascade will drive them back, but only for a short time. It will give us the window we need." She closed her silver eyes for a moment, and a complex string of data, a sonic frequency of impossible complexity, flooded my slate. It was beautiful and terrifying, a mathematical representation of the planet's own heartbeat. "I can do it," I said, turning back toward the vagrant. "But I'll have to bypass every safety interlock. If I get it wrong, the core will go critical. The ship, this crater, all of us will be a cloud of incandescent gas. Don't get it wrong." "Then," Ava said grimly, firing another volley at the circling stalkers to keep them at bay. "Go." I sprinted back to the ship, the chittering of the stalkers and the ping of ricochets echoing behind me. I dove into the engineering bay, the stench of burnt wiring and ozone a familiar comfort. The power core was a mess, a tangle of fused conduits and weeping plasma injectors. The warden's frequency was a nightmare, requiring a perfect harmonic balance between energy output and modulation. It was like trying to tune a Stradivarius with a sledgehammer. Outside, the fight was growing more desperate. I could hear Eva shouting commands, the heavy thud of Reese using a piece of salvaged deck plating as a makeshift shield, and the screams of the stalkers as they tested the heart's defenses. My fingers flew across the console, overriding one safety protocol after another. Alarms blared, red lights flashing a frantic rhythm of imminent doom. The core's hum rose in pitch, the containment field glowing a furious cherry red. One more adjustment. I held my breath, my hand hovering over the final command. I could feel the ship vibrating around me, straining at the seams. "Silas, now!" Ava's voice screamed over the comm. "We're being overrun." I slammed the actuator, For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, a wave of pure energy, silent and invisible, erupted from the ship. It wasn't an explosion. It was a pure, resonant tone that I felt in my bones, in my teeth, outside. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The crystalline spires around the crater lit up like tuning forks, glowing with an intense emerald light. The air itself seemed to hum with the warden's frequency. The stalkers shrieked, a sound of pure agony, as the resonant wave washed over them. They recoiled, their multiple eyes blinking in pain, and retreated back up the ridges, melting into the shadows of the jungle. The silence that followed was profound. The core alarm on my console died with a final, pathetic beep. I had done it. I stumbled out of the ship, my body trembling with adrenaline. Ava was helping Reese to his feet. Lena was crouched behind a rock, her face ashen. The warden stood by the fissure, waiting. The way was clear. "That won't hold them for long," she said as we approached. "They will adapt. We must act now." We gathered around the fissure. The emerald light from below was warm, inviting. It pulsed in time with the silent heart. Reese knelt, his hands shaking, and gently placed the sphere onto a crystalline altar at the edge of the opening. The moment it made contact, the light and sound intensified. The entire crater became a symphony of harmonic resonance. The heart's surface began to change, the black and silver patterns swirling faster and faster until they blurred into a single, radiant white. "The planting has begun," the warden said. She knelt opposite Reese, placing her hands on the heart. "It is drawing upon the life force of this world, weaving itself into the fabric of the cradle, but it needs an anchor, a consciousness to guide it through the chaos. It has marked you. Reese, it asks for your help." Reese looked at her, then at the blazing sphere. "What do I have to do? You must open your mind to it completely," she said, her silver eyes locking with his. "Let its song become your own. You will be its first root, its anchor in this reality. But be warned, the echo will feel this. It will know where we are, and it will focus all of its hunger upon you." Before Reese could answer, Lena cried out, pointing at her slate. "In orbit the silencer. It's deploying something on the screen." A dozen smaller contacts detached from the black ship. Drop pods. "They're coming down," Eva said, her voice flat. "Thorn isn't giving up. He's sending his hounds to the surface." "Then we hold them off," Reese said, his voice filled with a new, strange resolve. He placed his hands on the heart beside the warden's. "I'll anchor it. You all, just buy me the time I need. Buy us all the time I need." He closed his eyes, and the light from the heart flared, engulfing him and the warden in a column of pure white energy. We turned our backs on the ritual, forming a defensive perimeter around them. Eva checked her last clip of ammunition. Lena began frantically trying to interface with the crater's energy field, muttering about creating a localized EM shield. I stood with my pistol raised, my eyes scanning the sky. The drop pods hit the atmosphere like meteors, trailing fire. They were aiming for the crater, for us. The stalkers were gone, for now, but a far more dangerous predator was on its way. "Here they come," Ava said, her knuckles white around the grip of her pistol. We were no longer just salvagers. We were soldiers in a war we didn't understand, standing guard over a ritual that could save the galaxy or get us all killed. The hounds of the consortium were descending, and all that stood between them and the heart of creation was a mechanic with a busted pistol, a slicer with a prayer, and a captain who had run out of miracles. And behind us, a gentle giant of a man was trying to hold back the end of the universe with nothing but his own mind. The consortium drop pods screamed through the turbulent atmosphere of Viridia Prime, their heat shields glowing like malevolent crimson eyes in the bruised purple sky. They didn't scatter, they descended in a tight, perfect formation, a testament to the cold, calculated precision of their masters. We were their target, the single, chaotic variable in their equation of galactic order. And they were coming to correct us. Behind me, the column of light engulfing Reese and the Warden pulsed with a steady, rhythmic beat. A new heart for a new age. The ground beneath my feet vibrated in time with it. A deep, resonant thrum that was both calming and terrifying. Reese was in there, his mind intertwined with an ancient power, fighting a battle on a front I couldn't comprehend. Our job was simpler and infinitely more violent. "Lena, status on that shield," Eva barked, reloading her pistol with a final precious clip. Her face was set in a hard Zurich grim mask, the face she wore when the odds were impossible and the only thing left to do was fight. "I'm trying." Lena's voice was a strained gasp, her fingers flying across her slate. "The energy here is Iris wild. It doesn't follow standard field theory. It's like trying to build a dam in a hurricane with nothing but spit and good intentions. Then spit harder." Eva snapped. The pods hit the ground around the perimeter of the crater with a series of ground-shaking thuds, kicking up clouds of black, glassy dust. For a moment, there was silence, an unnerving stillness broken only by the hum from the geode. Then, with a synchronized hiss of pneumatics, the doors of the pods slammed open. Out stepped the hounds. They were Proctor Thorne's elite, the Archaeological Corps' enforcers, and they looked the part. They were taller than the standard consortium soldier, their pristine white armor augmented with black plates and glowing violet conduits. They moved with a chilling, inhuman grace, their plasma carbines held at a low ready. Their helmets were featureless, save for a single, glowing purple optic that swept the area with cold, analytical light. They were perfect soldiers for a perfect, sterile empire. Their leader, identifiable by the additional command insignia on his shoulder, stepped forward, his amplified voice, a synthesized version of Thorne's own, echoed across the plateau. "By the authority of the Preservation Accords, you are ordered to stand down. Surrender the Warden and the Silent Heart. Your continued resistance is a Class A violation and will be met with terminal correction." Eva let out a short, sharp laugh. "Terminal correction. Is that what you call murder these days? You can tell Thorne he can file his accords in the nearest black hole." She raised her pistol. "You want them? You'll have to come through us." The Hound commander didn't respond. He simply raised his hand and dropped it. The squad advanced, their boots making no sound on the obsidian ground, their movements perfectly synchronized. They fanned out, a closing net of white and purple death. They opened fire. A volley of violet plasma bolts seared the air. I dove behind one of the smaller crystal formations, the rock beside me exploding into a shower of superheated shards. The energy of the bolt was different from the standard plasma. It was colder, somehow, and it seemed to suck the very light out of the air around it. They're using particle disruption rounds, I yelled, my voice raw. They're not just trying to kill us. They're trying to destabilize the area's energy field, just as the next volley was about to hit. Lena screamed. Got it. She slammed her hand down on her slate, and a shimmering, hexagonal shield of emerald energy erupted from the ground, enveloping our small defensive position. The plasma bolt struck the shield and dissipated with a furious hiss, the emerald light flickering but holding. It won't last long, Lena warned, her knuckles white as she fought to maintain the unstable field. It's draining power directly from the geode's resonance. Ava was already firing back, her kinetic rounds all but useless against their advanced armor, but serving to break their perfect formation, forcing them to take cover. We were hopelessly outgunned, buying seconds with our lives. Suddenly, a new sound joined the fray, the chittering, furious shriek of the stalkers. They poured over the crater ridges again, a tide of iridescent chitin and gleaming mandibles. But this time, they weren't attacking us. They swarmed the consortium hounds. What the hell? Ava breathed, lowering her pistol for a second in sheer disbelief. The resonance, I realized, my mind racing. The hounds' weapons, their armor, it's an affront to this world's natural energy. The stalkers aren't helping us. They're defending their home from an invasive species. A brutal three-way battle erupted across the crater. Hounds fired their disruption bolts into the swarming stalkers, the violet energy tearing through their carapaces, but not stopping the tide. The creatures of Viridia Prime, driven by a primal territorial fury, leaped onto the soldiers, their mandibles and claws screeching against advanced plasteel. It was chaos. It was our only chance. Focus fire on the commander, Eva shouted, seeing the opening. Cut off the head, and the body will fall. We popped up from behind our failing shield and poured everything we had at the lead hound. My pistol round sparked off his armor, but Eva's, aimed with a veteran's precision, struck the same point on his helmet again and again. A hairline fracture appeared in his faceplate. At that moment, the column of light behind us pulsed violently. A wave of raw power, warm and golden, washed over the battlefield. It wasn't an attack. It was a broadcast. A feeling. It flooded my mind with an overwhelming sense of connection, of life, of a universe not silent and cold, but singing with a billion trillion voices. The stalkers seemed to fight with a renewed frenzy, their movements faster, more coordinated. Lena's shield stabilized, glowing with a steady, brilliant light. I glanced back. The warden was standing now, her hand resting on Reese's shoulder. His face was serene, his eyes still closed, but a faint smile played on his lips. The silent heart was no longer a sphere. It had dissolved into a pool of liquid light that was sinking into the crystalline altar, flowing down into the heart of the planet. The planting was almost complete. The Hound commander saw it too. He ignored us, ignored the stalkers tearing at his squad, and raised his carbine, aiming it directly at Reese. No, I screamed, breaking cover and charging him. He fired. The violet bolt tore through the air, but it never reached its target. The warden raised her free hand, and the bolt froze in midair, inches from her palm. It hung there for a heartbeat, a trapped sliver of anti-life, before it simply unraveled, dissolving into harmless motes of dust. She looked at the commander, her silver eyes for the first time filled not with sadness, but with a cold, ancient power. The stillness ends now, she said, her voice echoing not in the air, but directly in our minds. The ground beneath the hounds erupted, crystalline spires, sharp as spears, shot up from the obsidian floor, impaling several of the soldiers. Vines as thick as my arm, covered in wicked thorns, snaked out from the jungle's edge, wrapping around others and dragging them screaming into the darkness. The planet itself was fighting back, awakened and directed by the warden, the commander. Seeing his squad being systematically dismantled by a world that had come alive, turned his weapon on the warden. Before he could fire, a massive shape barreled into him from the side. It was Reese. He was no longer just Reese. His eyes were open, and they glowed with the same emerald light as the geode. The light from the column had faded, now contained entirely within him. He moved with a speed and power that was terrifying. His body wreathed in a faint, green aura. He didn't punch the commander. He simply placed his hand on the hound's chestplate. There was a flash of green light, and the hound's advanced armor dissolved like sugar in water, its power conduits shorting out with a shower of sparks. The soldier inside, a pale, frightened-looking man, stumbled back, his face a mask of utter shock. Reese stood over him, not with anger, but with a kind of pity. "It's over," Reese said, his voice a chorus of his own and 1,000 others, the voice of the planet itself. "Go. Tell your masters what you saw here. Tell them life is not a thing to be caged. The remaining hounds, their will broken, their technology failing, retreated, dragging their wounded, pursued by the shrieking stalkers. They scrambled back to their pods and launched, fleeing the living world that had rejected them so completely. Silence descended upon the crater once more. The stalkers, their purpose served, melted back into the jungle. Lena's shield faded. The world was calm. Reese turned to us, the emerald light in his eyes slowly receding. He looked like himself again, just more. "The heart is planted," he said, his voice his own again, though filled with a new depth. "The echo will not find this place. The consortium, they will be back. But this system is shielded now. It is a sanctuary." Ava walked up to him, looking him up and down. "You're different," he smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I am. I'm the anchor, part of this world now. I can feel every leaf, every stone. I can't leave. But I wouldn't want to." We stood there for a long moment, 4 survivors on an impossible world, the weight of our journey settling upon us. We had won. We hadn't just survived, we had fought back and carved out a piece of the universe for ourselves, for life itself. I looked at the warden. "What now?" She gazed up at the sky, where the silencer ship was already a distant star, retreating from the chaos it could not control. "Now," she said, "the song has begun. Others will hear it, others who are tired of the stillness, tired of kneeling. The consortium has its empire, but today we have given the universe a rebellion." My eyes went to the vagrant, our broken, beautiful home. It would take a miracle to fix her. But looking at my crew, at Eva's unyielding strength, Lena's brilliance, Reese's newfound connection to a living world, and the ancient warden who had guided us here, I knew that rust dogs didn't need miracles. We made our own. The work wasn't over. The war wasn't won. But we were no longer just running. We were building a place to stand, And from this wild, chaotic, and beautiful world, we would show the galaxy what it truly meant to be alive.